Good day to you. It happens to be morning as I'm shooting this video, and this is mission video number 2 for Clay and Sarah Kowalski, their family, and I believe small group that meets in their home, or at least they are part of a Bible study and small group, and have asked for a couple of these. And of course, I am more than happy because it's always exciting to reminisce and to talk about things that have happened on the mission field in the past. And I talked in the first video about work that was going on in Chandigarh, India, and how God had showed up big time in a trip where we went to Nagaland in northeast India and then up into the far north of India, north of Delhi. This time I am going to go back to my beloved Africa and tell you a story, a true story, I might add, of something that happened in 2015 that is to this day exceptionally memorable. Let me just say that obviously I've made a lot of trips to Zimbabwe in the last 20 plus years. Of course, grew up there, my parents being missionaries, and I'm now privileged to serve as chairman of the board of Hippo Valley Christian Mission. And so I've traveled some as in that capacity, but I've also taken a lot of teams. And as I look back, I had taken a team in 2010 to Zimbabwe, made up mostly of preachers, but also some folks from Mount Gilead. I had taken a team in 2011. I had gone, first of all, on a trip for the mission earlier that year, and then took a large team of 14 from Mount Gilead later in the year, 2011. 2012, I took a team of preachers for the Zimbabwe Preaching Summit. 2013, I took another team from Mount Gilead down to Cheredi, Hippo Valley area to serve. 2014, I took early in the year a group of preachers and also some folks from Mount Gilead. And then later that year, in the summer in America, but the winter in Zimbabwe, I had taken a team from the Church of Mount Gilead again. So a lot of trips to Zimbabwe, and I might add that 2012 trip was especially gratifying because my wife, my son, and my daughter were on that trip, and it was wonderful to share Zimbabwe with them. It wasn't the first time for Susan or for Drew, but it was for Courtney. So 2015, I was going to take a break. Didn't plan to go to Zimbabwe that year. Other trips that I was making in other parts of the world. And all of these years, I was doing other mission travel. At that point, healthy and just so excited always to go to encourage missionaries and evangelists to stand by their side and help them in any way possible, and oftentimes holding conferences and revivals and preaching summits and things like that. But 2015, no plan to go. And then I got a call from Daryl Pruitt, my good friend. Dr. Daryl Pruitt at the time was still serving as a dermatologist in the Keys. Very, very wonderful practice that he had with offices in Isla Morada and Key West. And Daryl's father, Dr. Denny Pruitt, had started the hospital at Mashoko Mission, where the work began. That is now Hippo Valley Christian Mission. So his father and another man named John Pemberton had started the mission work there on behalf of the Christian churches and churches of Christ. Dr. Denny was a legend. Daryl, cut out of the same cloth, just a wonderful guy, had a tremendous practice that he just sold a little over a year ago. And as I'm filming this, he and his wife are in Zimbabwe right now, working in a time of transition as Zebedee Togarepi, who had been our managing director, has retired. And we have some new people there in different positions and making some important changes for the future. And so Daryl and his wife, Mary, are in Zimbabwe right now. But Daryl wanted there to be a revival at a place called Damarakanaka. Now, let me just say that in the 90s, we had built a clinic there, and we normally just call it Dama for short. We built a clinic there, and it was a time when in that area, very rural area, very poor area, there was no medical care. And of course, HIV was running rampant in Africa at that time. Really, almost a whole generation was lost. And so this clinic was greatly to treat people suffering from HIV, from AIDS, but also to be a place where mothers could give birth and have healthy babies born and taken care of, and others could come for medical care and at times then be sent on to a hospital if that was needed. Um, Shepherd Joe, who many of you know, preacher in Terezi, know the Kowalski family has kept Shepherd and his wife Jane in their home. His father was actually the nurse there in the 90s and also did evangelistic work. And late in the 90s, we built a church there as well. Wherever we build a school or wherever we build a clinic, we always, of course, build a church because we want people to come to Christ. And ministers of those churches serve as chaplains at clinics and at schools. And Dharma, the clinic had done very well through the years. I'd been able to visit it a few times, but unfortunately, the church had not done well. We had a minister there who really wanted to be in more of a town or a city, especially his wife did not like the rural life, and they just weren't committed 100%. And we knew that, and we finally decided we were going to have to replace them and encourage them to go more into an urban or at least a decent sized town. And so a new preacher and his wife had come, and the church, which had languished, we really wanted to see it catch fire. Now, let me just tell you that Damarakanaka literally means good word. It's a Shona term, and it's actually where you've kind of put two words together to form a new word, if you will. We put these two words together, which mean good word, good news, if you will. And that's what the work was supposed to be all about. And we were hoping to revive that. And so Daryl had worked it out to have this huge canopy tent, if you will, just an enormous tent where the revival could be held. Terezi is about an hour and a half drive from Dama. And so we had a huge bus that we were going to bus down people from churches in the Terezi area for the weekend. And Daryl asked if I would come and I would preach. Another fellow named Pete, a preacher, a friend of Daryl's, was going to come and preach along with some Zimbabwean preachers. And Brent Miles, of course, when I asked him to go, was delighted. And so this was going to really be a fun trip, an exciting trip. Now, I got to tell you a little bonus. When we got there in 2015, it was in July, I think the second week in July. My son Drew had just was just finishing up a trip. He had taken, he and his wife, a team from Redemption Christian Church in Jasper, Indiana, where he was serving at the time. They had done a vacation Bible school at a place called Chicomo. They had worked with the orphanage there, Terezi Christian Children's Home, and they were just finishing up that trip. We got in on a Friday evening, I believe. Uh, could have been a Thursday evening, but Brent and I got down to Terezi and were able to have supper with their team. And then the next day, we were able to take their team, after all their work was done, into Ganarejo. This is a massive game reserve, about 5 times the size of Morgan County, so very large. And the name is actually a Shangaan word. The main language and tribe in Zimbabwe is the Shona people. Then there's the Ndebele tribe, the next largest, but there's also a tribe called the Shangaan down in the southeast part of Zimbabwe and into Mozambique. And that is the area of Ganarejo. And that word means place of many elephants. Indeed, there are about 13,000 elephants that call that place home, that just kind of go wherever they want to go because that's what those big elephants do. And of course, that day we were able, just going into a very wild place where you normally don't even see people at all. We were able to see so many elephants. Lucky enough to see a leopard taking out after an impala going up a hill. We were able to see Cape buffalo and giraffe, all kinds of antelope. Of course, hippos, the area is known for, as we went down to the Rundi River to a beautiful place called Jolojo Cliffs that has red sand cliffs that look very much like Sedona in Arizona. and have a picnic there. And then we were able the next day to bid them farewell as that team headed up to catch their plane in Harare. Brent and I then went down, and I think I did have the timing a little wrong on all this because we headed down early on a Saturday morning to be at the revival Saturday and Sunday. It had actually started on a Friday. So my timing was a little wrong. I think Friday we went into Ghana Rejo. Saturday morning, the team headed out, and then we went down to Damarakanaka. And it was exciting when we got there. Revival was already taking place. Many people were there. More would come. Um, I remember that we were going to have to figure out housing arrangements. Now, the African people were just sleeping wherever, many of them under the stars. Daryl and his wife Mary were going to stay in the house right next to the church where the preacher and his family live. And so Pete and Brent and myself were going to stay in the clinic. And there was a room there that had two single beds. So I told them to take the beds. I found a mattress. I was just going to lay on the floor. But someone in the clinic said, no, no, don't do that. We had a cobra in here yesterday that we had to kill, and we don't want you on the floor. So in the next room was part of the clinic. There was a table, an observation table, and a birthing table used by the doctor there when they were delivering infants, which happens often at our clinics. And so that was the best that I had. And it's funny because it doesn't sound comfortable, but I slept great on that bed. And when I woke up the next morning, I was excited because I was going to be preaching. And I remember that we walked a couple hundred yards up to the preacher's house, and we sat out in plastic chairs in the sunshine. Now, it was winter in Zimbabwe, and although Dama is normally very, very hot, it was kind of a chilly morning. Um, we had a tea that had been made for us, good Zimbabwean Tanganda tea. We had big, thick loaves of bread that we were cutting and putting jam on them, and that was our breakfast. And I was so blessed because I was sitting there with some Zimbabwe legends. The first one, Watson Mabono, who was the first preacher trained by the mission. He began preaching in 1959, and he just went last year to be with the Lord. One of the greatest evangelists I've ever known. Also sitting there was Niacin Mapika, who my parents had helped train and teach. Niacin in his early 70s at that time, another great, powerful preacher. He also was going to preach at the revival. And then, of course, Zebedee Togarepi, who at the time was in his 60s, my dear friend and the managing director of Hippo Valley. And Brent got a picture of me sitting with these legends of the faith, kind of Hebrews 11 guys in my mind, and that was very special. And then we headed off to the tent, and I was going to be the first preacher of the morning. Zebedee was going to translate. Most of the people there spoke Shona, some spoke English, so they didn't need to translate into Shangan. So I just had the one translator, that was Zebedee, and a large crowd gathered. But before I preach, let me tell you what the people in that church were doing. Dama sits out in the middle of nowhere. I said it's about an hour and a half from Cheredi. It's all on dirt roads. You have to cross a river with a very low bridge, and when the rivers are up in the rainy season, you can't get across at all. But this was winter, the dry season, so we had no problem. Very dusty roads. A little bit of a difficult time getting there on some occasions, but we had no problem. And anyway, this large crowd, like I say, was gathered, but the people in the church had taken it upon themselves to go into the nearby village. I actually have never gone into that village, a little township that is maybe a couple miles from where the clinic and the church are at. But we had a couple of pickup trucks, and people just stood in the back of those trucks from the church as they had gone in and just evangelized, invited people to the revival, told people about Jesus. It kind of reminded me of old time evangelistic work. When I was a young preacher back in the 80s, it was still okay to go and knock on people's doors. Believe it or not, you wouldn't have someone meet you with a shotgun. And I remember when I was at Marengo Christian Church that often with an elder, we would just go around the neighborhood and we would knock on doors. I would introduce myself as the preacher of the Marengo Christian Church, invite them to our services. Sometimes they would say not interested, but oftentimes they would say, "Hey, can you tell us a little bit more about the church?" Occasionally, they'd even invite you in, and you'd have the opportunity to talk with them and to share your faith. Terry Christ, back in the day, helped build Mount Gilead by doing that same kind of work. And so people had gone and they had invited and they had shared. And unbeknownst to me, in this service where I was going to preach in that large crowd was the local witch doctor. Witch doctors are a big thing in Zimbabwe. Um, they are sometimes called muti men. Muti is a Shona word for medicine. And they do all kinds of strange things. They do sometimes give roots and herbs and things that can be helpful, but most of them dabble greatly in sorcery, in black magic and witchcraft. They oftentimes will have people kill animals, maybe drink blood, eat certain parts of the animal, sacrifice them. Uh, they have been known to ask people to kill someone and sacrifice them, oftentimes even a child. And a lot of murder takes place in Zimbabwe, really at the command of a witch doctor, because that's the way you're going to be healed. And this fellow was well known, and he was a frightening person, but they had invited him, and something in him was sparked, and so he came. And it wasn't because of my sermon. Although I preached the best that I could, and Zebedee always is a great translator, interpreter, and he makes the sermon even better and understands the culture, and so he can translate it in a way that they will appreciate and understand it. And at the end, there was an invitation, and a number of people came forward, including this witch doctor. Niacin, who I mentioned earlier, Niacin Mapika, went and talked with him for a while as we sang. And then he came up and told the story. And he said, in my 50 years of ministry, I've never seen a witch doctor come to confess Christ, but that's what this man is going to do. And he did make the good confession. The local preacher took his confession along with some others. The witch doctor asked to speak, and he got up, and he was very animated in Shona. Niacin was translating it for those of us with English ears. I do understand some Shona, but not enough to catch it all. And he was extremely charismatic individual. And you could tell that the people hung on every word. And he was a little bit of a showman, but he was very excited. And then Niacin told him that if he was really going to give his life to Christ, and before he was baptized, he needed to go and get all of his paraphernalia, all the things that he used in his sorcery and in his witchcraft practice. And so he did. They went and got all of those things, and they came and they were burned. And of course, that was following a good New Testament pattern. Now, as I'm shooting this video, Jeff Falls just preached from Exodus about the magicians in Pharaoh's court. He talked about how they could duplicate some of the miracles of God by using satanic power, demonic power. And that happens in Africa a lot. I've seen it in Africa, in Haiti, and other places, India certainly. And the power of Satan is nothing to be messed around with. Jeff mentioned that the devil masquerades as an angel of light. The one passage he didn't mention, and I kind of teased him, I said, "Oh, Jeff, you should have gone to Acts 19, verse 19." And he said, "If I would have thought of that, I probably would have gone there." And Jeff and I oftentimes, will give each other suggestions. Obviously, Jeff is as good a preacher as I know anywhere in America. So I'm not saying that I can add anything to his preaching, but, we all have our thoughts that are sparked. And as he was speaking, I thought about Acts 19:19 at Ephesus, where Paul preached and taught for a long period of time. And at one point, people came, and let's go back to verse 18. It says, "Many of those who believed now came and openly confessed what they had done." These were not only sinful people, but people that had been dabbling in uh, black magic, in sorcery. And so it says a number who had practiced sorcery, that's the NIV. The New American Standard says magic. Some translations say black magic, but it says a number who had practiced sorcery brought their scrolls together and burned them publicly. These were their books that they used and referred to when they were doing sorcery, when they were using the power of Satan. By the way, in Revelation 22, when it talks about heaven and this beautiful place where the righteous, those who have been made righteous through the blood of Christ, will spend an eternity, it talks about those who are outside of the heavenly city. And I'll just take you there as a matter of fact, because always better to look up the Bible than just give a paraphrase, right? So listen to what it says. It says in Revelation 22:14, blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may go through the gates into the city. Those who have been washed and made white through the blood of Christ. But verse 15, outside are the dogs, those who practice magic arts, the sexually immoral, the murderers, the idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. So black magic is nothing to play around with. I remember as a kid, my dad always said, never go to a seance if your friends talk about it, never play with a Ouija board, never play around with Satan and his power. And I listened to my dad and thankfully never did any of those things, but have seen some pretty frightening things at times overseas. But this fella came, he said he had faith in Christ. He named Christ as his Savior. He said he was repenting of his sins. He went and got his paraphernalia, which were things that he had collected, and probably not only had he spent money on it, but this is how he earned his livelihood. People would pay him, if not in money, with chickens or with maybe maize that he could make suds of, something like that. So he brought it all, and it was burned. And then later that day, after other services and other people came forward, there was a baptism. My friend Simon Mupa, who ministers not too far from that area, he actually is doing missionary work across the Zimbabwe line in Mozambique, in a place called Chikwalakwala. And it's a border town and a place where criminals go, a place where those things that are stolen in Zimbabwe are taken across the border and sold. It's a rough place. I have been there. And Simon has planted 3 churches, one in Chikwalakwala, a couple in villages nearby. And he originally spoke Shona, his native language, learned English in school, but then since going down there has learned Shangaan as well. And just an amazing individual, one of the sweetest men you'll ever meet. And Simon was the appointed baptizer, and I believe there were 17 baptisms, and I took a picture of each one because I wanted that. And of course, the picture of the witch doctor going underneath the water, being immersed into Christ, buried in baptism to arise into newness of life. Because of his faith and obedience, knowing that his sins were washed away like Saul of Tarsus of old as he shared his testimony. What a wonderful thing. And so it was with incredible rejoicing that we were able to finish up the revival. And before it got dark, of course, we wanted to head home. The road's not really safe after dark. First of all, in that area, you sometimes have animals in the road. One trip to Dama, there were elephants that were crossing the road, and of course, we stopped for them. You don't try to test the elephants with your vehicle because they're a lot bigger and stronger. But we headed back, and Britt and I then had other tasks that we went about in the following days, including myself going up to Mashingo to meet with some preachers there and spending some time with Zebedee. But what a great revival it was at Damarakanaka. And truly, it lived up to its name. The good word was preached by many. I have to say that while it helps draw a crowd sometimes having a white man from America come, the best sermons that were preached were by the Africans. And my buddy Nias and Mapika was so powerful and so animated and had such a beautiful message, one of the best that I've ever heard. And it was just an amazing time. And they have then continued on a regular basis to hold revivals there. Mary, by the way, always works with the children. And one year when Christelle Marino and Tara, that was, let's see, trying to remember now, I did the wedding for Logan and Tara. It's Tara Allen now because she married Logan. She wasn't married at that point. You'd think I'd be able to remember her name. It was Tara Davis before she married. And so they were there doing an internship, and they went with Daryl and Mary and worked with the children, teaching them and showing films, Bible films, and just having fun, almost like a vacation Bible school. So that has continued. The church is growing. I would ask that you pray for it because, like all of our churches there is so much that they're facing right now, not only with COVID, but with a lot of government interference, with financial, economic problems. But that church is growing, and we are so thankful at Hippo Valley Christian Mission to be able to uh, have 27 schools with 19,000 children and able to have 3 clinics. We work as partners with Mashoko Christian Hospital in the bush, and of course, churches that have been planted and continuing to be planted all across the southern part of Zimbabwe, particularly in the southeast, and then also into Mozambique. And I'll tell you more about the work of Hippo Valley another day, but I hope that I made some good sense as I talked about that special revival and the joy. And I didn't even tell you about the amazing music, but sometimes maybe I'll send you a video as the people dance with joy. And the ladies do this ululating that I can't imitate, but it's a very joyful sound that they make as they dance and they praise the Lord unashamedly, and dust is kicked up everywhere, and people are just celebrating Jesus. And it's some of my favorite moments. And so I've got pictures and video. And when I talk about Hippo Valley, I think I'll try to send those along. But I hope this suffices and pray that your group is continuing to learn about missions. I know you had uh, from uh, from Papua New Guinea, you had Mac and Caitlin. I know you had Mike Pemberton talking about India. And what a wonderful thing. And thank you for your encouragement, your prayers, and your support. And especially my greetings to the wonderful Kowalski family. And I hope to be able to see you in fellowship with you sometime soon. So God bless. Have a great day.